Here comes Devereaux. Mete mano!
Oh, excuse me. I couldn't help but notice that you two groups of people are about to start killing each other, and I was wondering if you could please just wait on that until we could get off the train.
Sit down, witch.
Yeah, witch, sit down. Sit down.
Are you gonna let him get away with that?
Wait a minute.
I was kidding.
That was really rude. Take it back, apologize.
Brad, stay out of this.
He called you a witch.
Brad, shut up!
Hey, listen to the witch, Brad.
Watch your mouth. You big city scum sucker.
You just can't keep your foot out your mouth, can you, boy? Let me help. Don't fool with the lords of hell.
Hey, everybody. It is the third Thursday of the month, or after the third Thursday of the month, depending on when you're listening, which means it's time for another glorious episode of Nerd with Dre Alvarez and Jeff May. I am your co-host, Jeff May, and
I am Dre Alvarez, and I'm just going to say, I'm sitting over here distracted, Jeff. I'm listening to the amazing episode with you and Dan Larson that just dropped for free on Tuesday, Jeff. I might not be fully here. I might just have to keep listening to that instead of this. But funny point, on that show, Jeff and Dan Larson this Tuesday discussed the sweet spot for nostalgia. And I believe you said the range is 1984 to 1987. That is an interesting range, Jeff. Do you know what came out in 1987?
I think I do, because we're recording a podcast about it right now.
Oh, what would that be? Am I stealing Tom and Jeff watch Batman? I'm sorry. I don't want to steal your other bits. Listen to that too, Jeff. But what are we recording on? What is
we're talking about Adventures in Babysitting, the 1987 classic, written and directed by Christopher Columbus, not the Navigator. I think Chris Columbus, I think is the way he goes by. That's his DGA name or whatever. This is one of the most seminal films of my childhood. And it fits so perfectly in our theme of base childhood neglect. And also, established America's crush on Elizabeth Shue, really bumped up a little bit more past Karate Kid.
100%. And what I'll throw out to you is, I've said this a few times before, but shout out to friend of the show, Landon. You can find on twitch.tv/RicksterGT. You will be shocked to hear this, Jeff. His favorite scene in the movie happens in the mechanic shop. I bring this up because if you check out his site, Space to Bricks, that's DEBRIX.com. Sorry to do plugs up top, Jeff. He has his game Radical Racers, which he built for fun. It is a racing game with a mechanic in it. So shocker that he likes that. He threw this out to me. He was like, I really liked Adventures in Babysitting, and he saw it in a bar that was doing its own nerd thing.
Wait. He saw it in a bar.
Okay, as an adult. So he saw it as a kid, fond nostalgia from a kid, re-saw it as an adult at this bar, which is called the Hollow Nickel. Lots of geeky stuff there, Jeff. We don't have time. People, look it up. That's your homework. They were doing their own nerd thing, Jeff, the trio. They had a babysitting night, which would make an excellent episode of Nerd, but we don't copy here, so we can't do it. It was Mr. Nanny, Adventures in Babysitting, and Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead.
Great
solid
mix.
lineup. That's A+.
Would have been a great season for us.
Well, I'm kind of glad he told me, because then we'd done it accidentally and get accused of plagiarism. We were like, no, great minds. But he said he when he was a kid, he watched this at his grandma's house on VHS. You have brought up that kind of anecdote that your grandma, when you were a kid, would record stuff off HBO.
An HBO bootlegger, baby. HBO, Showtime, Cinemax, the movie channel. She had them all.
And you saw this, so that is cool, because I was going to say, you said that. I wasn't sure it applied to Adventures in Babysitting. You brought that up before. So when he said, could you make this an episode? I said, well, it doesn't fit into my theme of the season, but it might work. And that's when we went with parental neglect. And you are much more excited than my original pitch. We might talk in the future. So this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect, Jeff.
Mm-hmm. I'm very excited to do this movie. So this movie, to put it relatively bluntly, this is the sort of apex of 80s, kind of comedy. I don't know how to describe it. It is a comedy, obviously, but it is a very fast paced. I don't know. It's insane, I guess, is the best way to describe it. This movie is wild. I forget what the production company was, but it went over to Touchstone. So Disney took it. They weren't going to release it under the Disney emblem. So it was released on Touchstone, which is for more adult themed stuff. Um, Unfortunately, Adventures in Babysitting was ported to Disney Plus, and it was edited for television, basically.
It's an interesting point because you get all these people. You couldn't make this nowadays. There were certainly edits now. The cursing, when it's straight cursing, it's hilarious, and that's actually going to
Sure.
be the stinger for this because one of the most famous lines in this movie is there's a gang and they say "Don't fuck with us," and Elizabeth Shue
Don't
picks up a
fuck with the
knife.
Lords of Hell. Yeah.
Don't fuck with the Lords of Hell, and Elizabeth Shue picks up a knife and says, "Don't fuck with the babysitter," and it is awesome. "Don't fool with the babysitter" does not land the same way.
Not at all. And it's okay. So look, they pull out certain words. Obviously, fuck is the main word. They also pull the like
The
they
H
pull
word.
a homophobic slur very early in the movie because you could just do that back then. That was like they didn't care.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily they replace that H word with weirdo. And that was, that would work perfectly when they release it on TV. Although actually, to be fair, when they released it on TV, they probably use that word too. Um, and then the other sort of one that they really pull that is one of the more memorable scenes from me. But I understand why they pulled it because it's a horribly divisive word and something you shouldn't joke about. But when they're getting in the car to go, Elizabeth Shue goes, "If you screw around, I will kill you." Dead, murdered. And then Daryl's character, Anthony Rapp, just goes, R-worded. And it's almost like I was like, well, if you kind of pull that thing, if you pull that joke, then that scene just doesn't mean anything. Like there's no tag to it, so it just didn't work. But I also totally get why they pulled it. So I'm of two minds of this experience where I'm like, yeah, of course you don't want that word in your Disney Plus show, obviously. And at the same time, I'm like, but then also you've kind of really damaged the scene.
Well,
Um,
what is great about this movie, I'll throw this out, Jeff, is a lesson I've learned from all these episodes of Nerd is I do like the 10,000-foot view. Because I realize, we do copy some of your other shows where you do a beat by beat. And in trying to think of one for this movie, this describes the movie. I was like, oh, there is no 10,000-foot view. It is literally Elizabeth Shue while babysitting, a bunch of hijinks ensue. You may as well just go beat by beat through the plot because trying to explain it at a top
Yep.
level is really hard. So we will definitely be doing that today. But I mean, I want to do not even a segment, just a point is this is another one of those movies. Now, for what it's worth, this was successful. Unlike Searching for Bobby Fischer, the first episode in this season of childhood neglect, which sadly, this makes me sad as a chess fan, Jeff. So clearly, what happened, and one of your fans noticed on the forum, is Searching for Bobby Fischer was trying to copy Little Man Tate, which was this $10 million movie made with Jodie Foster.
Were they
about a
trying to
child-
copy it? Because I was the
I-
one that mentioned it, and they were like, "Yeah, I did. I'm just now realizing those are different movies."
They are, but but I looked that up. So that's what's interesting is basically, I assume in Hollywood, what typically happens is when you pitch a movie, you say it's like blah, and that gets you the budget and what they're looking for. And so Little Man Tate was released before Searching for Bobby Fischer. It is about a childhood prodigy. It does have a lot of the same issues. Should your kid go to a genius school? Should they have normal interaction? Parents versus experts that, do they get the heart nurturing them versus the head, which was a theme that comes up. Made for about 10 million. Jodie Foster as the lead, makes about 20 million, so makes twice its budget. And, then of course gets some good nods. So when Searching for Bobby Fischer is coming out, they're going, okay, we'll give it a similar budget, same kind of thing. A bunch of people looking for awards will go on it, make twice its budget, happy movie, and then it tanked. It probably made its money back with VHS, but did bad. Whereas Adventures in Babysitting, released in 87, this movie did well, $34 million.
Well, and of course, this movie did. I'll put it this way: this movie did okay. What this movie did do was get a massive cult following on home video. Whereas like Searching for Bobby Fischer did fine after the fact. This is sort of like one of the big conflicts going on right now. So as of recording, when we talk about the impact between like the producers and I believe some more news just released an episode about blockbusters and what's going on. And they address something that I was actually going to address here, which is studios didn't have to worry about box office. They didn't. They had to care about them, but they knew that they were going to recoup their expenses on physical media. That is no longer an option. Physical media is no longer a thing. So they're going to broken systems to try to recoup that expense. And you know what? Honestly, just listen to some more news about it. You'll get a better description.
Well, and then also
let's
let's make him a regular appearance on this season of Nerd. I'll have to figure out how to shoehorn him in episode 3. But Matt Damon had a viral clip a few years back about that exact point, which is if you give someone a budget of $20 million for a movie and here's what they're expecting, and here's the thing, the reason you're not seeing those $20-30 million movies is because of the home media market. Yeah. And to your point, yeah, I mean, like Adventures in Babysitting, that title, let's get to this. If you have not seen it, go look up the cover of Adventures in Babysitting right now. And Jeff, you did the most Jeff thing, because I looked it up, and something that I Must Break You, your show where you break packs of cards, has really started getting me an eye for is art, because you're going through these beautiful, you do comic book cards a lot. You just did, let's see, you did some Batman recently. You did Marvel versus
Saga of
DC.
the Dark Knight. Yeah.
And you're going through and you're like, oh, this looks like this artist. Who was the hero you discovered on last one that we didn't realize? And then after the fact, realized he had passed for Marvel versus DC?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here.
Okay.
I forget the guy's name, but he was fantastic.
Yeah. And we'll maybe get the name later. But point is looking for it. So I looked up the cover of this and looked who it was drawn by, and shocker, prolific artist that's done lots of movie posters.
Yeah, I could have told you who it was by if you had asked.
And then I said it to you. I said, this guy was prolific. And what was your response, Jeff, when I did that to you?
I sent a photo of his appearance on one of my sideshow shows.
And I was like, of course he's one of your friends, Jeff. And of course we've mentioned that was part of the thing. You're friends with one of the leads of this show. You've talked to him before.
Keith Coogan, yeah. I believe I sent you the photo of Keith. Keith plays Brad. And he's a really nice guy. I met him, I believe, at Comic-Con Palm Springs. He was making an appearance. And also it was Orbic was the artist, by the way.
And
artist from
fantastic artist. And that I always hate when that happens as a fan of art, when you discover someone new and you're like, this person is amazing. What are they up to? And it's like, oh, they passed. And you're like, and it's weird. It's weird to miss someone you never met. You never met them. You weren't even aware of them until you probably saw some of their stuff, of course, but you weren't aware of them until 5 minutes ago. And then you're like, oh, they're gone.
Yeah. So
that's not fair.
My connections are obviously connected through the nerd world, through 3 of the people involved. Obviously, Drew Struzan. He came in while we were filming an episode of Unsealed and Revealed, and we didn't know what was happening. And we were like, do you want to? And he came down and sat down and joined us for a second. And my co-host, the beautiful and wonderful soul that is Guy Klender, huge indie fan. And he was like the expert, the toy expert. And he was like almost in tears, thanking Drew for like the designs of his childhood and stuff. And so Drew Struzan, I do have photos of me and him. Unfortunately, it's in a setting that I don't particularly love anymore. But it is what it is. Now, from there, of course, Keith Coogan, very, very nice guy. Here's the thing. I met him outside of the con. We were hanging out. And I think it might be my height, because I remember him being tall, because I was a child watching him, and he was close to an adult when he was in 2 babysitting movies, of course, Adventures in Babysitting, and then Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. And I saw him wearing an Adventures in Babysitting shirt, and this guy outside. So here's how the connection was made. He's wearing an Adventures in Babysitting shirt, and I was like, dude, I love that shirt. And I was like, where'd you get it? And he's like, I sell it. And I was like, where's your booth? And then the girl I was dating at the time goes, he's the guy on the shirt. Like, she recognized him, even though he looks, very different, because,
Sorry to do a brief steal and injection for my wife, because it's a fun story.
Yeah.
I got tickets to a Colorado Avalanche game once. It was awesome. And part of that was like a meet and greet with the coach.
Oh, nice.
And we went and did that, and I took care. And so I'm the big hockey fan. She's not. They did of course they're in helmets, so you don't see them.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of they had various Avalanche players talking. So we're just standing super far away. And my wife looks and she sees Ian LaPerriere who they had actually given out a puck for at the game. And she's like, "Isn't he the guy?" And I like waved at him and he came over. But it was the funny thing where like, I'm the big hockey fan. We're there. A
Yeah.
Colorado Avalanche guy is walking by. I didn't spot him and my wife did. And I'm like, oh, you outfanned me. That's fair.
Sometimes fresh eyes happen.
Yeah.
So long story short, I ended up being like, oh man, I really appreciate you. And I ended up buying a shirt from him. And I forgot to bring it to this, but I have a Adventures in Babysitting 8x10 signed by Keith to me. And then the Elizabeth Shue story boils down to when I worked on The Taste, the show where I ended up befriending Anthony Bourdain. And we filmed right across from NCIS, I want to say. What's the one with Ted Danson in it? So I was on a golf cart with my boss, who's also a friend of mine, my friend Joe. He now runs a site called The Illuminati. And he was like the hashtag show. He was the one that sort of helped create it and produce it and everything like that. So he was my boss, and he would bring in all of us to work on stuff so we could be around each other. Really nice guy. We're driving by and he like waved at Elizabeth Shue. She's outside like reading a script, dressed normal, dressed like an actor, dressed to be a normal person. And he waved. She's like, oh, hey. And we're going by and I looked at him and I was like, why are you waving at Elizabeth Shue? And he just goes, what? And I was like, yeah, you're just like waving at Elizabeth Shue and saying hi. Like, do you know her? And he's like, no, that's just some like medic lady that I know that I've been talking to all week. And I was like, oh man, here's the thing. No, it isn't. That's an actor you've been talking to all week named Elizabeth Shue from The Karate Kid and Adventures in Babysitting and Cocktail.
Back to the Future too.
And The Saint. But, and he's just like, really? And I was like, yeah, man, like that's, and he's just like, oh my God. And he immediately like froze up. But yeah, it was a very funny, cause I was like, I could pick her out from a crowd because I was in love with her since 1987.
Yeah. Everybody was. Yeah.
But so this movie is great, but it is very Mad Libs. You can't predict where this movie is going. Every setting that they enter is very hard to predict.
I've got a question for you about that before we get going to the plot, because, you know, I've kind of noted that you are like an architect of story, that you are a very nerd person. We've discussed that a lot on the show, that you do like deconstructing narrative, and that's where you'll have problems with stuff. I had never seen this movie, much like Dan Larson, who you can listen to on Jeff Has Cool Friends, right in front of this one. Sometimes I'll give this bit of advice to people. Sometimes your RSS reader, like I have a Downcast, if you've got it set to only keep the most recent, you might miss an awesome episode in front. So if like you were busy this week and you opened up your Downcast on Thursday, I'm telling you, go back to Tuesday. Go back to
dropped
Tuesday.
2 days ago. Yeah.
What I'll throw out is Dan had never seen this. I'd never seen this. So I watched this with like fresh eyes. I found it interesting that from a narrative perspective, I really liked this movie. In that it did something that I'll steal a line from The Incredibles. Brad Bird, the director of The Incredibles, said his thesis for the movie The Incredibles, the Pixar movie, was the fantastic mixed with the mundane, right? You've got these superheroes fighting like a big monster, but in the middle they're having marital problems, right? You've got this guy that is doing stakeouts with his friends. Well, you know, he's dealing with paying the bills at home. This is very probably Jack Kirby, but Marvel, you know, Stanley can take credit, but whatever Marvel was doing back in the day, a lot of what they did. And I found this movie did that really well, almost like you're saying Mad Libs improvisational style, like give us 2 words and we'll go next, but we're going to have a very grounded reason for these people to get to A, and then we're going to elevate that level to 11, and then we're going to bring back the temperature down by doing something else. And I actually just like watching it was like, this is really well done for how batshit this movie is from like a script writing perspective, from giving motivation to characters, from how you move the plot along.
The plot is really moved along miraculously well. And I say miraculously because it's not particularly, it's unpredictable, and in a way where you're like, come on, like, no, you wouldn't do this. But yeah, that's why it's a movie and not a
Well, and let's get to, and by the way, I'll finish up like the Jeff MDB is what I was joking about. Like a lot of old movies in the 80s, this movie is stacked because of course it's got Elizabeth Shue, Anthony Rapp, who goes on to just be like, I think first in Rent, and then does the movie as well, and just freaking amazing. One of my favorite
Currently on
stories about
Star
him.
Trek Discovery.
Yeah, there's a lot of Star Trek people on
And
this
I mean,
too.
he was also, it's the very important thing about Anthony Rapp is that he's kind of the one that blew the whole lid off of the Kevin Spacey thing.
That's wild. That's like,
He's one of Kevin Spacey's victims. Yeah.
That sucks so much. But I mean, and we've made this joke about other shows, including Searching for Bobby Fischer, but like this is an IMDb trap. If you're like, I've never heard of that movie, and you go and you start clicking on the headshot, you're like, he's in this, they're in this, she's in this, et cetera, et cetera. So like Anthony Rapp is that. A big one that you brought up was Vincent D'Onofrio, who plays like I joked to my friend, I said he is He-Man Kingpin Thor because he goes on to play the Kingpin. He originally, we'll talk about that nerdy stuff in a second, but so he's there. You know, George Newbern is in this as Dan. And then of course it was so hard for me, Jeff, because he goes on to voice Superman in Justice League. So at the end of the movie, I was hearing you and Tom's voice making fun of Superman at the end of the movie, which I don't think people on the first watch through got, which is just ridiculous. And then like another big name, Bradley Whitford, who this is sad because I know him as the scumbag dad on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He's done a bunch of other stuff. He
Billy Madison stuff, not Eric on Billy Madison.
But that's the other thing. So many of these actors, if you're like, I know them from this, and you go, really not from this, you're like, oh yeah, they did that too. But I guess what I'm pointing at is the age discrepancy, because in this movie he plays the smarmy boyfriend, whereas on Brooklyn Nine-Nine he plays the swarmy dad, and you're like, oh man, I'm old.
That's what happens when 30 years pass.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, this is him like origin story, because Bradley Whitford throughout his life, smarmy antagonist.
Yeah,
like he nails that role. And
he nails sarcasm. It's very Vince Vaughn-y of like, you know, he's going to be landing very similar roles, and he's going to do it well. My favorite sort of like ditch character has to be Penelope Ann Miller.
And the note I had for this is 100% the Chris Evans in the She's All That parody, right?
Oh, she's got glasses on.
Yeah, it's like
hate on her overall.
Yeah, so yeah, she's the nerdy best friend who goes on to be like the smoke show girlfriend in movies like The Saint.
Yeah, but Penelope Ann Miller was just hot at the time anyway.
Yeah,
the irony in this is that the biggest star at the time might have been Keith Coogan.
Interesting.
He was very active at this time. He was like, if you had a teenage boy in anything, it was gonna be him. Like, he was like a pre-Fred Savage in that regard, that like they were going to him. He was Todd in The Fox and the Hound. If you look at his IMDb, that kid was busy at the time. And I just find that fascinating. Of course, Elizabeth Shue, you know, she was in Karate Kid, and that was just a runaway smash. But I find this really, really interesting that the cast is very, very talented. And of course, the actor that played Sarah ended up going to shows like My Two Dads and then Step by Step. And I believe she's a lawyer now.
And I think she's married to Sarah Spots, I think is the thing, who is another like Hollywood name. So it's one of those, you know, did it for a while, then left. And then Sarah Spots is like a big producer on a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, so this movie, very formulative. It's, I guess the easiest way to put this is like the A plot and the B plot. The B plot pushes the A plot. So it's a little bit different in that the B plot is you have Brenda trapped at the bus station, kind of screwed, right? She went to the city. It's very scary. She's a suburban kid. And there is a big thing about sort of suburban versus urban, like how scary cities are. It is, it is Chris Columbus. So it is, Chicago and then the suburbs of Chicago. So Penelope Ann Miller's character having run away is the catalyst for why everything has happened. So we periodically check in on her hijinks. Meanwhile, the actual movie is happening, and that's the stuff we care about. I find that interesting.
Is that not? I mean, it's interesting to try and think of other movies. I mean, the big one that this seems super similar to is like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, of just like, oh, they're doing a thing, and like
Yeah.
the motivation for the thing is kind of meh, and the big thing is these two people on an adventure that just keeps going to wild locations and getting into weird
Sure,
hijinks.
but the motivation is actually, and I guess in a way you are kind of right, because the B plot of that movie is the principal, the child porn
Oh
criminal
yeah, that's
principal,
voice actor on Justice League a couple times
yeah,
too.
getting
Bummer.
into nightmarish scenarios while trying to deal with their thing. And that's what Brenda is doing as well. So I guess it's not an uncommon, especially for in the 80s. I find it very refreshing that it's not like, oh, these two plots will eventually meet up. It's that this plot is literally moving this plot forward. And that's the catalyst. And
Yeah,
I
it's
think
kind of it's very Star Wars-y back and forth, but then they're actually more related. And let's get to it. So what I'll say, you're a monster, Jeff. We're going to start in the opening scene. The opening scene's purpose is like, if you were not in love with Elizabeth Shue before, you're going to be in love with her now.
absolutely.
It's her lip syncing to "And Then He Kissed Me" by the band called The Crystals. I don't know if it's intentional. The character's name is Chris. Song's The Crystals. Just cute, but whatever. And what is a nice combo is it is a very wholesome oldie song that she is doing a combination of very sweet, in some cases, childlike dancing to, mixed with adult thing. And the implication we're getting, if and tell me if I'm reading this wrong, is she ends on the bed looking back and she says, "This is going to be the greatest night of my life." So
She gonna get it.
yeah. So basically, the implication is this is going to be the first time her and her boyfriend have sex. It's an anniversary date. And then, of course, what Jeff did with that is you said, "Oh, yeah, modern thing, it'd be like drive me crazy. She's dancing to him." Put that on your Instagram, and you
I
ruined
did.
an amazing scene.
Well, yeah,
in history.
because it was 24 year the song that she was lip syncing was 24 years old at the time. So the song was from 1963. And so I was like, well, shit, what would if that was filmed today, what song would it be? And then I was like, what was 24 years ago? Oh, the year I graduated high school.
Oh, good God.
Which that's a way to age me. Something that you might not have picked up about this is that by establishing in the beginning of this that this 17-year-old girl is accepting that she is a woman now, she actually gives a lot of verbal hints that that's what is happening here. She keeps referring to Brad, who is only 2 years younger than her, as just a kid. She keeps saying, "You're just a kid. You're a little kid. You're just a little kid." When in reality, they're practically the same age. And then we find out later, spoiler alert, that when she catches her boyfriend cheating, he basically is cheating because she will not sleep with him, which was the thing she intended to do that night.
The joke comment I made in this is that was real Drew Barrymore energy there. Like,
Right.
you broke up with her the night before, but of course, he sucks. And yeah.
Yeah, so this starting dance thing, right? Elizabeth Shue, I'm watching this and I'm like, there's no way she's 17.
23 when this movie
It was
filmed.
23. And that's important to me because she is also like not necessarily, well, she is sexualized. That's one of the MacGuffins in this, is that there's a Playboy that is literally, they did a shoot with Elizabeth Shue wearing clothes, by the way. She did not want to do that. They did a shoot with her and made her like the Playboy playmate was her doppelganger. But every time people talk to her, they're always like, "No, you're much more beautiful than her." And it's all adults that are saying like, "No, you're way hotter. You're way hotter than this playmate." And you're sitting there and be like, "This is still a child though." So that is interesting. But she's so beautiful in this scene. She's absolutely stunning. And then we get the doorbell and it is Brad pulling up in his so cool red
Oh,
Camaro.
it's Mike Brad is his
Mike.
real name, and
Oh,
then
yeah,
Mike
sorry,
is the
Brad
character name.
Yeah. Mike shows up, cancels. "I got plans. My sister is sick. My parents are gone. I can't go out. We'll do it next time."
And then then he kind of gives away the game. We get the implication that she probably catches it because she's like, "Well, just come over. We'll make soup." And he's like, "She's contagious." And then he doesn't want to kiss her because she's contagious. And you're like, yeah. Like, and it's worth noting, he plays it well. So it comes across as like something's up. And then the immediate next scene is her hanging out with her friend Brenda. And she's like literally is like doing the paranoid thing where we're like, yeah, no, you're right. There's something off there.
It is very funny to me to see two people, and especially because remember, like people in the 80s naturally looked older than people do now at the same age. There have been plenty of YouTube things explaining like, did people in the past actually look older? And it's like, yes, they absolutely did. So they both clearly look almost 30. Like Elizabeth Shue's 23 playing 17, but in reality, if you were like, she is 28 years old, I'd be like, she sure is.
Yeah.
She looks like a modern 28-year-old. And Bradley Whitford looks 32. And like, I know he's playing a teenager, and he probably was in his early 20s, but he looks exactly the same as he did.
Like in Happy Gilmore, yeah.
Well, I was going to say in friggin' The West Wing. Like the hairline has receded slightly back. It's wonderful. Nobody cares. Everyone looked, 17-year-olds looked 25 back then anyway, so that's fine.
He is from Madison, Wisconsin, so shout out Bradley Whitford.
Oh, yeah.
59, so he was 28 at the time of that movie.
Yeah.
27 probably during filming.
Which, to be fair, he might not have been a high school kid. He might have been a 25-year-old dating a 17-year-old mad.
We don't.
It doesn't matter. So,
next scene is Chris is talking to her friend Brenda, just the randomly glasses and, she's frumpy looking, but clearly beautiful.
Frumpy Penelope. To be fair, like Penelope Ann Miller, one of the most beautiful actors at the time. And they're like, put her next to Elizabeth Shue and put some glasses on her and you will think she's ugly. And like, kinda like when you see her in that scene, you're like, what's Elizabeth Shue doing hanging out with this one? And then like you see her alone, you're like, that is a very beautiful girl.
And then what I'll throw out is there's a weird subplot that never ever gets resolved. And I'm curious your read on it, because essentially she's hanging out with her saying she is so fed up with her stepmother to the point that she might feed her Drano. Then she says, I've got to go home and deal with it. Then she runs away from home. Then at the end of the night, she doesn't want to go home. Sorry, spoilers, they do get home. End of the night, she gets home and Chris is like, you got to just go home. And I'm like,
she's like, I don't want to. And it's like,
I'm like, what's going on at Brenda's house? She's threatening to kill her stepmom. She ran away from her stepmom. Should we be looking into that? But the movie, by the way, does not care.
She getting beat, or is she just a teenager? But I think what that is really coming down to, and what we actually see very quickly, is that Brenda is an impulsive teenage girl. That is very dramatic. How dramatic? Dramatic enough to go away to a bus station and continue to have dramatic experiences. Now, granted, she is getting traumatic experiences happening to her, but it all comes from this sense of impulse, that she is very needy and very impulsive. She's a very teenage girl mentality. So
Brent. So then what ends up happening in that scene is Chris's mom comes in and is like, the so-and-sos, I should remember their last name, but I don't. But the kid she's going to be babysitting, she said, they just called to see if you can babysit last minute. And it's they do, when I'm talking about well-written,
by the way,
Andersons, they do well-written throughout this movie, despite it being fantastical. This is one where they, do the cheat, because she's like, I'm too old to babysit. I'm not going to babysit. Flash cut to, she's in the car, clearly going to babysit. And I'm like, we'll give you that one to start the movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she's a woman now. That's another part of it. Yeah. Babysitting is a kid's job. It's a teenager's job. She's a woman. She's accepted that she is a woman now. And so that is part of it. She's just like, that's a kid's job. She continuously keeps saying, I'm a grown-up, I'm an adult, and these are children. These are children. I'm an adult. I'm above this because I'm an adult. When in reality, we're watching her be like, 17 is a child. Like, yes, we get that. So then we meet sort of the Andersons. The Andersons are Brad and Sarah are the two we're going to care about. And then the parents, who are just the most oblivious, waspy. They probably do so much cocaine.
That would have been funny if that was what was going on. We meet them later at the party. And by the way, I'll throw this out. This
fat rails of coke. Yeah.
The Simpsons later does a very similar episode where like Lisa babysits Bart and then is just like gets Bart into a bunch of trouble. And the end of the night, the parents find out and she's like, oh no, you're fired. And they're like, you back next week. And like, that was the funny thing at
Yeah.
the end of the movie. She's like, I'm going to be in so much trouble because, spoiler alert, like one of the kids ends up hanging off the side of a building, which is on the poster. And I'll tell you, those parents, if she's available next weekend, they'll take it.
Yeah,
100%.
these are some latchkey kids if I've ever seen them. At least they get a babysitter, right? So Brad is in love with Chris. Chris is the senior in high school. He is the sophomore. He's in love with her. Finds out she's coming. He's supposed to be sleeping at his friend Daryl's, who's Anthony Rapp. Daryl is the color. Daryl is the comedy character. And he's a perfect character. He's just perfect.
Well, I'll throw this out too. Like when Keith, like I've read some interviews with Keith Coogan about it, where he originally interviewed for Daryl and then, got pushed to Brad. And he was just like, Anthony Rapp he's like, no, he's like, he's like perfect. I agree.
But he got to be a little bit of Daryl in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, where he got to play a dirtbag in Kenny. So he did get to play that, but he was usually the clean cut straight man. And I'm glad he got to flex a little bit in 1991 when he revisited that. But so yeah, Anthony Rapp, just so good, sharp, hilarious, playing like the perfect horny teen, impulse, pure id. Brad is sort of super ego, and Daryl
Sarah, the little Thor.
Daryl is just id.
Oh, gotcha. I thought you were going to talk Sarah.
These are the two different. You have the honorable. You shouldn't be saying that, and then the impulsive whatever. And there are parts where Daryl prods Brad to do some very dangerous things, which is very funny. So they basically blah blah blah. She's stuck babysitting them. We find
one important thing I'll throw out is, you were about to talk Sarah.
That's a massive Thor fan. She's obsessed with this character. And she is basically like, she steals Brad's Clearasil because she ran out of brown paint. And it's like all this stuff about like, she's obsessed with this character. She draws him, she paints him, she's the hero. It is very funny because every time she talks about Thor, it seems like there's only like a slight understanding of what Thor actually.
And part of that, which I got to give huge props to Chris Columbus, the director. So on the first script of the movie, Thor was going to be He-Man. Same exact idea. And I mean, to be fair, it looks a lot alike. You've got like an Adonis looking person with blonde hair and a symbolic weapon. She was supposed to be obsessed with He-Man. Chris Columbus came in and said that was one of his changes, is he wanted it to be Thor instead. And I love this so much, Jeff. And while I have done cards for most episodes of Nerd in the last two, I'm not doing this. I'm telling you that ahead of time because it would be so fun. 1987 is the first series of Marvel cards that has the Thor rookie card. $60 a packet minimum.
Are you sure? 1987?
Yes. 1987.
There weren't some 1960s.
Ooh, okay. Well, you're being
that came
mean.
out.
I don't know if there were okay. Jeff,
Marvel Series 1 by Impel came out in 1990. There were card sets before that, yes. Yeah. And I believe there's one that came out in 1966.
Okay, fans, check it. But I was going to say what makes this fascinating, right, is we've talked He-Man on the show. He-Man was kind of at his apex. You talked Dan Larson with this as well. And basically Chris Columbus pulled like one of the biggest names that is about to go on one of those precipitous drops.
Oh yeah, 1987 is the end.
The end of He-Man, and picks Thor, who is, and I mean rightfully so, kind of, I think the logic he probably had is she's obsessed with this character and everybody thinks it's kind of weird, and it does end up paying off at some point. So he wanted to pick, he's like, I don't want a super popular character. I want a known character that she would have access to, but I don't want him super known. But he basically picked Thor. Like he sold He-Man at the peak. He bought Thor at the dip. And then of course, now we look 30 years later, Thor is iconic and everywhere. And He-Man, is still known, but yeah.
I'm going to add a little bit of extra color here. This was also the time period when the greatest Thor works were being made. Specifically, this was for 4 years, Walt Simonson was the one taking care of Thor as far as being a writer and artist. And I know he was at least a writer. This is where he created Beta Ray Bill right around this time. This is considered the seminal period of Thor, is 1983 to 1987. But none of that is addressed in this, which I think is really interesting.
Basically, Thor is a cameo from Chris Columbus. It wasn't like Kevin Smith when he was writing Coyote Ugly, like the first pass, and is really well known, like knows the Punisher lore and this is the opposite where it's going. The whole premise is this kid's obsessed with a big, tall, blonde guy. Later on in the movie, she meets a big, tall, blonde guy. She acts like this and warms his heart. That is really the crux of that Thor obsession. It doesn't end up mattering in this movie, but it is like a nice cameo from the director who was a huge Thor fan.
Yeah. And Sarah is an imp. She's a mischievous imp in this. She runs around and she doesn't really necessarily care who is harmed in her way. She acts on impulse, again, very id based. She leaves roller skates around. Brad almost fucking breaks his neck. Coming down from that, there's a part where she abandons the group several times actually during the movie. She abandons them. She throws Brad under the bus about his crush on Chris immediately. She's like, if you don't take back what you said, I'll tell Chris about all those love poems you write about her. And he's like, fine, I take it back. Thor's not a weirdo.
Oh yeah, that was, he said something else. I listen.
Yeah.
I listened to both. I listened to the Amazon. I rented it on Amazon for the full version. And I watched the Disney Plus. It's not that noticeable. And that's the funny thing. If you listen to Disney Plus first and go to Amazon, they are jarring when they pop up.
Yeah. And then she immediately goes, hi, Chris. You get to yada yada a little bit of the beginning as the parents are leaving and they're like settling in. Brad's going to go to Daryl's, but he's decided he's not going to. So Daryl's harassing him. And then finally she gets the call from Brenda. I got to go. She's like, Brad, can you please watch Sarah? I have to take care of her. Absolutely not.
Well, this is Sarah being impish because Sarah's like, he can't watch me. Clearly she's poking fun at both of them.
They all want to go. They want to go with her to the city. And she's like, it is a fucking dangerous thing. Absolutely not. And they're like, we will narc you out immediately. So instead of calling one of her friends to take it and be like, look, I need you to do this. I have to go get Brenda, or you have to go get Brenda. Somebody's got to go get Brenda. Instead of that, she's just like, fine, let's go. Daryl joins the fellowship by also threatening blackmail. And he also brings up the Playboy and says, I stole this from my dad. How exciting is that?
It gets thrown out the window early on because that becomes important because there is a Playboy where the playmate of the month it is Elizabeth Shue, but in storyline looks like Elizabeth Shue, gets lost immediately. Daryl's out of Playboy. How are we going to replace it? Will this get addressed? Of course, this movie, again, one of the reasons I really like it is very much, I've heard classic movie is, and this happens, right? A causes B. If you're writing a good movie, A causes B. You never want to do A, then B. You want to do A happens, then B. This is 101 stuff, I am aware. And the other thing is, of course, the Chekhov's gun, right? You introduce something into the thing.
Chekhov's Playboy.
Yeah, Chekhov's Playboy, Chekhov's Thor hammer. You go, why are you spending time with this? It's not to say you can't ever have like things that don't matter, but it's usually, if you're going to spend time in something on a story, 101 level writing says make sure that matters to the story, otherwise you might be wasting time.
Yes. So they're on the expressway, and then what you just described is what I was about to say. Throws out the Playboy and shows it to him. Then Sarah's telling like a story. Babysitter's inside the house, man with a hook, scrape, kills the kids. They blow a tire, and they're now in the city. They don't have a spare, and she also forgot her purse, so they're screwed. Then we see Dawson's tow truck come out, and we see what is essentially a terrifying man get out of. He is goes by the name Handsome John Pruitt. He's a big, gruff, scary guy with a hook hand. He's actually just a really nice dude. And he's like, you got onto the expressway, you didn't have a spare tire, you have no money. And she's like, I'm screwed. And they treat him like he's a psychopath.
Well, to be fair, as you're noting,
the hook hand.
Good writing 101. She is telling a scary story. And for whatever reason, in the 80s, the hook hand, the hook on the windshield, that was a popular one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's telling
baby, they loved it.
Yeah. So basically it's going, she was just telling the kids about a scary hook hand ghost story she knew. And then a creepy guy with the hook hand shows up. Not super logical, but they all freak out. And then she even calms down. She's like, yeah, sorry, we were really scared. Thanks so much.
And he's like, I'm used to it. But because she's like, please don't kill us, basically. And he's like, no, I'm going to buy you a tire. And she's like, you don't have to do that. He's like, what else are you going to do? Like, you don't have an option. So he gets them in the car and he's driving them there. And we get a call from Dawson of Dawson's Garage saying, drove by your house. And he's like, and who'd you see? He's like, you don't want to know. He's there. And all of a sudden, this guy goes wild. He's driving his car crazy fast. Elizabeth Shue's looking back at her car being like, that's my mom's car. Please don't destroy it. Can you please slow down? He will not. He goes over to the glove compartment, opens it. And one of my favorite lines, he goes and with his hook, he grabs a gun and starts pulling it over. And Daryl has his eyes closed. And he goes, is it a hand? And Brad goes, no. And he goes, oh, good. He goes, it's a gun. He goes, oh, God. And that interaction is so good. Is it a hand? No. Oh, good. It's a gun. Oh, God. It's so great. It's so perfect. Guy shows up, finds out his wife is having an affair, shows up to kill the guy. So maybe he's a nice guy, but also he's a hero the entire movie. And also an unhinged maniac. And I love that about this. Like, every time he shows up, he's good while he's doing crimes. Like, he escapes.
Yeah, he does. He shows up one more time later, and then he's running from the police at the end of that.
Yeah, just absolutely great. Like, really fantastic stuff. So they go and hide in a Cadillac.
Not the most logical, but does make sense. It's going to move the plot along. Yeah,
I think they're just trying to find a place where they're not going to get shot. And they get in a red Cadillac. There's already somebody in it. He drives.
Well, the thing is the cheating guy is running to it, so it's his car. So, oh no, he's going to bust in, which is part of the funness, because then what happens is it's at Joe Gibb, I think is the character's name that ends up doing it. Then it turns Joe Gibb, played by Calvin Levels, awesome name. So basically, he's like, get out of my car. They're freaking out again. Car peels out. They look forward, and it's getting driven off. And Elizabeth Shue, to your point of being like, I'm a woman now, while still just having the nice naivete of a child, is just like, thanks so much, mister. Thanks for getting us out of there. And the other people in the car, like Brad, is just like, he's stealing the car.
And she's like, can you please let us out? And he's like, here? No.
And that is, by the way, that is 100% accurate. I've had some friends who went to University of Chicago, and that they've noted that is the funny part of Chicago, is that you can basically have the University of Chicago, which is, we meet them later in the movie, these like preppy, waspy, well-off kids. And you go like 2 blocks over, and it's like, get the hell out of here right now.
Bro, have you heard of New Haven, Connecticut? Yale is an island in a cesspool.
So the classic rich college in the middle of like a bad area. So that actually tracks, where he's like, I am a car thief doing crimes, and there is no way I'm letting you out here.
And I'm still like, no. But he takes him to a chop shop, though, which also is not going to be good. And we meet the villains of the film, because it is a very well organized crime group. They're dealing cars. They're having a meeting, and they basically, all the kids are like, hi, we're gonna go, and they're like, you sure aren't. You're gonna tell people where we are. And they're like, and it's funny because part of it should be them just being like, we're kids, we don't know where we are. We have no idea where we're going. We just want to get home. And like, I'd think that anybody in that scenario in a non-movie setting would be like, get these fucking kids out of here. But also I understand that they're like, well, we don't want to get found out just in case this kid's like,
I think
kids of a cop.
The way I've described movies a lot is it's almost like a magic trick.
Yeah.
Because there always has to be a level of silliness to the movie where you're like, oh, if that didn't happen, then the movie doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And where movies get bad, it's you're like, that is ridiculous. You are clearly just, Palpatine has come back from the dead. And you're like, just try, do something.
Mhm.
And so I think movies where it's the nice level is where, when you look back, when you're doing what 2 nerdy 40-year-olds are doing and looking back at the movie and going, wait a minute, does this make sense? The question is, while you're watching it in real time, you're like, oh yeah, it makes sense. It's going, they're here. The criminals are like, put them in that room.
The Brady Bunch upstairs.
Beautiful impression.
His voice is so good.
That is John Davis Chandler as Bleak. So awesome.
Absolutely. He nailed it, by the way. He's so good. Every time he's involving himself with other people, that character is a delight. And then there's also Joe, who's like the sort of middleman between mean boss and, low end car thief of Gip. Is it Joe is the other guy?
There's Ron Canada is the guy who ends up stuck on the building.
Okay, yeah,
And
never
then
mind.
there's I don't remember the guy. One of the things we'll bring up is the guy who drinks the bad. I don't know all of their names. I'm looking at like the top.
No, that guy's just
The
a
top
featured
billing
extra.
runs out. But yeah, so basically, in a chop shop, big deal going on. Kids are put in again. Does it like this is where in hindsight you're like doesn't make a ton of sense, but we'll give it to them. They're like stick them in the office. We'll deal with them later. Turns out the office has a bunch of confidential papers, including a Playboy with a bunch of records written on it. So while they're doing this deal, the kids are like, we are screwed, rightfully so. How do we get out of here? This is one of the only parts of the movie I was like, it's out of my league. But they're like, we can climb up out of the window out of this office because it's in a warehouse. So, it's not a real office. It's like on the upper scaffold.
Yeah.
We can climb out the top. There are beams across, and then there is a beam to an exit out the roof.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there.
A
And I was like,
dangerous but doable walk. It's a balance beam walk. Yeah.
it's just, yeah, if you had watched that, I was like, nope, it would have been the Matrix for me. But the kids are doing that. And then, of course, Daryl sees that the Playboy with the same centerfold is on the table, takes it to get back. And this is going to be the crux of our plot because for whatever reason, the head villain, the Bleak, wrote a bunch of notes about the car deals in there, claiming, this is one of the few cases of tell, don't show, where the character later says that could put us away for 20. So the kids,
This is what I was saying about it being the MacGuffin, by the way, is like this is the thing that they're going to be chasing after, and they don't even know that they're being chased for it.
and of course we have the like awkward scene. So Joe Gipp as a character, the carjacker, he has this very interesting. We have a couple of these, right? These morally gray characters, him and Handsome Pruitt, that are there to help the kids, but also do questionable things themselves, and also seem kind of like spectators, where they're kind of watching this going on and like, this is interesting. Let's see what happens.
It is sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
It is I think a smart way to establish that the things you think of when you think of quote the city, right? It's like very black and white. That's happening right now. We always make the joke that white rural people are afraid of the concept of cities, where the reality of it is when you get there, it's like there are good people. There are even good people that don't have great jobs. There are good people that even do crimes. There are, at the time, 1987, there are good people that smoke marijuana. Like, what they're establishing is like the world is a lot grayer than these kids think.
It's really funny because this just showed up with you and Dave Bell, I think, on a strike cast. But what I love about Joe Gipp is he is essentially a low-level employee for this crime rig.
Yeah, he's labor.
And he's like, keeps just like, kind of like laughing at the bosses and kind of ignoring them and stuff. And it's one of these cases where he's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to fire me? Like, whatever. Because I think Dave was bringing that up. He's like, sometimes you work these menial jobs. You work at a Target, a Toys R Us, a fast food place. You go through a major rush. The rush is over and you're like, I'm out. And the boss is like, you're not supposed to do that. And you're like, or what?
Yeah.
And so Joe Gipp has that energy this entire movie.
He's a little too chill, to be 100% honest, because these are men that have guns. So, like, I don't know what the retirement plan is when you work for organized crime, but like, there's a good chance they might just shoot him in the face. I would also like to add that he is weirdly reminds me of gender bent Whoopi Goldberg. Like they have,
I can see it.
He has a male version of her voice that kind of like drawn out, slightly raspy, but very cool and calming voice that not like he talks like Guinan. Like it's fascinating.
Adventures in Babysitting, but Guinan is time traveling. Guinan is the car thief. I am here for it. But yeah, so the scene is right. They're walking across. Joe Gipp is just watching us kind of like in bemusement. Nobody's noticing. One of my only complaints of the movie, although you kind of explained it, is they're on this beam that has rust or dust on it. And Elizabeth Shue's character knocks on it. Movie magic, it falls perfectly into the coffee cup of one of the villains. He lifts it up to drink it. We're like, are they caught? And a lot of this movie has scenes like that. Don't look. Are you going to look up and see what's going on behind?
Yeah.
There's a scene going on. There's hijinks in the background. Very, as you're noting, like very slapsticky. He drinks it. Is like, I like it, and moves on. And I was like, no, you're not going to like rust. But the kids do manage to escape. But
probably more dust at that point than rust.
Yeah.
But it's also a good statement of like, how bad the coffee is. Where you guys are,
But they're about to escape, but then of course, as discovered, one of the villains is like, I need the Playboy with the notes, go into the office. He goes into the office, the kids have escaped.
well,
no, the kid-
there's also something that you're glossing over. He's like,
What do we
go
got?
get it. He's like, I brought it into the office, and he goes, why? And he's like,
Oh, for the article, he's they got
and he
easy joke.
clearly was J&O to the Playboy, which is very funny. That the I forget the middle management guy who's
It's Ron Canada is
Ron.
his name according to IMDb.
So the Ron character basically was saying, yeah, I gotta go get it. It's up with the kids. I was jacking off to it up there. Like, that's the implication. And it's not even like a soft implication. It is a very firm implication. He's like, yeah, that I was jerking off up there.
So next scene, this scene was one where, having never seen this movie as a kid, when it happened, I was like, uh-oh, because there's a very similar scene in the movie Weird Science that a lot of 80s, you get white kids around black, you try and do the suburban versus city, and you get some bad impressions and stuff. And I was ready for that, but not so bad. What happens is, apparently famed guitarist Albert Collins is the person. They end up in a blues club. Albert Collins is playing. Of course, classic. Everything stops there. These kids, Elizabeth Shue is just like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your little concert. We gotta go.
She's also super condescending.
Yeah.
We didn't mean to interrupt your little concert. And he's just,
I thought it was, we might be reading that a little different, because I read it as the like naive suburbanite not knowing what to do, but it can come off as
referring to it as a little concert is rude.
Oh, fair enough.
Like, that's just rude. Like, if I said, oh, Dre, I love your little things that you do, you'd be like, what the fuck's that supposed to mean?
Oh, Jeff, be nice. Okay, but then we get a fun scene.
I love your little podcast. And you'd be like, oh, fuck, man.
But anyway, so I was going to say, you brought up in our notes, that's a funny thing, because he goes, nobody leaves without singing the blues. And then we get actually a pretty enjoyable scene where, like, Elizabeth
Babysitter
Shue
blues
narrates what has happened going forward, slowly starts making it rhyme, slowly starts singing it. They're doing the classic, whatever that, I should know the riff, but the da-na-na.
Yeah, it's the blues.
She's doing the blues. Yeah, is that just the thing? Or is it, I wouldn't be shocked with some from famed whatever musical score that I don't know, like you did with Rodeo. But anyway, that happened, and Five Goes West. Listen to the backlog, people. But that's a very nice scene. Very fun song, fun to watch. Kids get out, and then the villains try and go chase them. And then this is where you have the note. You're like, what happens when people don't sing the blues? I want to know about this club, because the gangsters go up to him and he says, you don't leave without singing the blues. So, like, is he like some kind of like,
yeah, this has the opportunity to create a paradox, because depending on how binary the rule is on nobody leaves here without singing the blues, does that mean that every individual member of the audience has to sing the blues at the end of the concert in order to leave? Or are they instructed simply to sing along to the last song?
And I could also buy maybe the rule being like, hey, if you're on the stage, because since they're chasing the kids, they get on the stage, and it's like, hey, if you touch the stage, you don't leave without singing the blues.
The more terrifying aspect of that, though, that we never see, is what did the mob guys do to leave?
I want to see the scene where they sing the blues.
I don't know if they sung the blues or if they took out guns. We're leaving. But either way, it is a problem.
There's a bit of space between them and the kids, so there is some level of distraction. But I'm my headcanon, Jeff. They sing the blues, and I would love to see that scene.
Yeah.
Something it's not just in the synopsis I'm reading over, but it is revealed that basically, Mike, Chris's boyfriend, is kind of a jerk and has bullied Daryl, possibly Brad, and they're making fun of him. They're like, he's such a douche, and he drives this car, and he has like a vanity license plate that says so cool. So at this point, when they're getting away, Brad is trying, and then I think their decision is to head. At this point, I can't remember what they can see their parents' building. When they were coming to town, they noticed it. And at this point, they're kind of like, we've lost our car, we're being chased. Let's cut our losses. Let's just go find your parents. This is pre-cell phone days. And they don't have money, so they can't do payphones. So that does make sense. They start heading that way. And at this point, a bunch of funny little hijinks ensue, which is one, Brad actually tells Chris, he's like, yeah, I like you. And she laughs at him. Now, a real world story, I'd be really interested to hear, like, if Keith ever does show up on Jeff Has Cool Friends, and I did actually research it. He does say this in real life. is that when he was filming the movie with Elizabeth Shue, like in the hotel they were staying, and she's like, "Hey, want to get dinner?" He goes and gets dinner at a fancy place, and he's like, "Oh, this is almost like a date scenario." And he's like, "Oh, maybe we could date." And she like laughed at him. And in the movie, the same thing happens when she says, "Like me." She's like, she says, "You should date someone other than Mike." She's like who? And even Sarah's like, "Don't say it." And he says, "Like me," and she just laughs. Allegedly, like, I got to give Keith credit. Like a 17-year-old kid going for a 23 Elizabeth Shue at that time, just full props in the world for him for having that courage. And then apparently it also helped his performance in the movie because his character in the movie, that's a lot of his art.
Yeah, being in love with Elizabeth Shue must not have been hard. They're like, okay, well, you have to act like you're in love with Elizabeth Shue. He's like, got it. And they're like, are you sure? He's like, no, I've had it for 3 years now. But you also got to remember too that like child stars in the 80s they can get away with whatever they want. Like
Yeah, a lot.
they had stuff going on where he wasn't doing poorly at the time. Now,
that happens. I was curious, one other like hijink that was kind of funny. So at the same time, this actually kind of slightly gets us back on track, but same time, Daryl is like trying to get a date with a prostitute that he doesn't realize. And they're like, you're not like hitting on someone. It is a prostitute, although he knows, he knows, like at first he's like, I'm going to try and get a date. And later he's like, you wouldn't believe what she would do for $20. And then they go and talk to her. They're like, she's like, what are you doing out here? And she's like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm the babysitter. I'm 17. The prostitute said she's 17. I guess the prostitute, by the way, is actually like the wife of someone and did like choreographies. That's kind of a funny.
I think she was the director's wife. Wasn't
I think director's wife. So it's just like a funny director likes fun cameos. But she says she's only 17. She goes, what happened? She goes, I ran away from home. They go,
she's
Brenda,
like,
we
shit,
got
Brenda. Yeah, I gotta go.
And then they're like, then that's when Chris is like, let's cut our losses. Let's just go find your parents. Let's just go get Brenda. Let's get the hell out of here. But whatever happened in the blues bar has been resolved.
Since then, though, I think we haven't been checking in on Brenda. Yeah, we haven't been checking in on Brenda, which by this time she has lost her glasses. She had put her glasses down, and a homeless woman that was living at the bus station took them. Now she can see. Very exciting for her. I believe now when she's like, oh my God, Brenda, that's when we get her. And I'm sorry, I don't have this like step.
Yeah. For whatever, and a lot of the recaps on this, people just mentioned Brenda at the beginning, but as you mentioned, the B plot driving, we keep checking in on Brenda's in the bus station, seeing she's in overhead. The first time she's there, the thing that actually does convince Chris to come along is there's just this random guy that keeps brandishing a gun in the bus station.
Because I've seen 3 people shooting up, which as a kid, I thought she meant with guns.
Yeah, but no, she's talking.
And
that's possible.
Now I know that it's heroin. Yeah.
The gun out, maybe a little over top or whatever.
There's a guy like waving a gun, like stalking Brenda with a gun, and she doesn't go to the authorities at all.
There are there's a homeless guy that is yelling at her in the phone booth saying, "Get out of my house." That does imply Brenda does have some money, so she does collect calls. So never mind that, but she could call someone else. She
only has a check.
Yeah,
because she tries.
We'll get to Let's talk that.
She has lost her glasses. I think the next thing is
the 2 things that happen. One is she smells hot dogs. That's how she gets there. She goes to buy one. Does get a funny,
it's like a third party check. Yeah,
a juvenile thing where she's got a check from Chris that Chris's mom gave her, and she basically, this is actually a thing I remember, right? Where you'd have a check and you hadn't cashed it, and you'd give it to someone else. You'd be like, I have a check for $25 from my mom. I'll sign it over to you. You give me $10. You go cash the 15. That kind of stuff. So that's what's happening. So she says, I want a hot dog there. He goes, okay, whatever, $2. She hands him a check, and she's like, I'll sign the check over to you. You give me the difference, and we're good.
No, I think she even says you keep the difference.
Oh yeah. So she's being nice.
He's like, you can fuck right off.
Which makes sense. And so what he said, you get the childish joke because he says, you give me the money, you get the wiener. She says, I don't have any money.
You the wiener, he says.
He goes, I don't have a wiener. Ha ha ha.
He goes, well, I don't have money. Well, I don't have a wiener. And he throws it in the trash.
Yeah. Ha ha. And then the other thing that happens is she thinks she sees a cat and she picks it up, and it's just a giant rat.
Defenseless little kitten, and they're like, that is a jumbo sewer rat.
That we're going to kill, because they say we're going to kill it. She goes, how dare you kill this defenseless cat? And they're like, no, that is a rat.
Defenseless little kitten like this. Kitten, they start laughing. Kitten, lady, that's a jumbo sewer rat. And she looks down, and it is a big albino rat.
So that is the state of Brenda. And when we get to her at the very end, I got a comment, but it's okay for plot convenience. So that's the state of Brenda. At this point, the gangsters have caught up to the group again. They're going to try and run off, and they run onto the L train. And just and this is also a good holdup because what happens is they jump the turnstile, get on the train. The gangsters jump the turnstile, just miss the door closing. You would assume the gangsters might have time to catch up, but then the guy there is like, "Hey, you pay for those kids, or
Somebody's
I'm
got to
calling the
pay for
cops."
them kids, or I'm calling the cops. Take care of it.
Love it. That is like spot on what happened. So that's how the gangsters get distracted. I thought this was really clever on the train because this is very like West Side Story, but again,
The train scene is fantastic and is spoiled by its editing.
oh, okay, yeah, we talked that a little bit again because so basically what happens, they get on the train, they're like, "Ah, we're safe." And then you see two groups of gangs that are stereotypical, but not to the level of offensiveness of say West Side Story. And I think you knew one. What was the Hells?
There's the Lords of Hell, and I forget who the other guys are, but it's they seem like a multicultural gang, which is nice. Um, red team and black team. That's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, and so they show up, and what I loved, what I thought was so clever is they get on, they go, "This is our turf," and the other guy goes, "Well, it's your turf. It's like our turf starts here. We're on a train. You're
Yeah.
going to be in our turf soon." So you've got these two guys standing
Well, I
on
think it's
opposite
like
sides.
this is our train, and then it's like your train is coming into our turf.
So it is beautiful because they're respecting this line, but you can see the line moving, and you know as soon as he goes, "We just crossed," and so they're about to fight.
Yeah,
And
we
I was
just
like,
crossed Jefferson.
I was like, that was just really clever. I thought that was cute.
It is a great little bit, and then right when they're about to stab each other, and like it seems like the fight is really about to happen. Elizabeth Shue breaks them up and is like, "Can you please just let us get off? Like this is before you start killing each other." And the captain of the red team just goes, "Bitch, sit down," or whatever.
Oh, there is a lot of the B word
Yeah.
is said a lot in this scene.
Yeah.
But that
and-
actually does lead to what happens because as you're saying, like the Daryl being like the id, he basically says to Brad, "You gonna let him talk to her like that?" And it's the nice part because they are being rude and crass enough where it's like that isn't cool even then. But the answer is just like leave it alone. But Brad, gotta give
That's
it.
like, "I am valiant," and then Daryl's like, "I was kidding," which is
Yeah.
so funny.
I love
He calls him a big city scum sucker. And he goes, "You got a big foot. You're gonna put that foot in your mouth." And then he just fucking whips the switchblade into his foot through his boot. And shocking. So, holy shit. He goes, "Don't fuck with the Lords of Hell." And then Elizabeth Shue goes down, pulls the knife, puts it right at the guy's throat, and goes, "Don't fuck with the babysitter." This is the line of the movie. And it was handicapped by Disney putting it on Disney.
Don't
Plus
fool
instead of
with the babysitter, Jeff. And by the way,
fool.
if editor Dre does what I intend to do in the future, this is future me. That is going to be like the tagline that starts it is "Don't fool with the babysitter." So you've heard it.
And on top of that too, like they replaced bitch with baby, which
Yeah,
also, slightly condescending instead of being horribly misogynist.
yeah. I mean, the replacing the H word makes complete sense. But that being said, when Vincent D'Onofrio, we're going to get to him in a minute, gets really angry, it doesn't make sense. You're like, you called him a weirdo. What's this big tough guy? Like if I came up and
Heard
called you a
rumors about me,
weirdo,
kid?
Jeff. Yeah, if I was like, "Hey, are you a weirdo, Jeff?" You'd just be like, "Who are you?" And you'd walk away.
I'd be like,
Same
"What,
thing here.
Gonzo?"
Yeah. When all these gangsters are calling her baby, and he's like, "You gonna let her talk to her?" It's like you're like, "Yeah, I mean, it's a little dated. I mean, are they from the 50s?" But yeah. So anyway, they get off the train. Brad is injured.
This moves a lot quicker than I remember, by the way. This is back in the golden age of movies where they were rarely over 90 minutes.
It was an hour and 40, and that's what's fascinating is this movie moves really quick when it moves fast, and then during there's some meandering parts. So it's like it is an hour 40 that despite all of this action in it has time to breathe.
Yeah,
Like routine.
they end up kind of like carrying him into the ER. They're very dramatic about it. He got a knife in his foot and they're carrying him like he was hit by a truck. And they bring him in. They keep calling it a stab wound and everything like that, which in a big city hospital, a stab wound is a real stab wound. And so their suburban outlook on what is a medical emergency, he ends up getting one stitch because that's it.
And
It probably like grazed past his pinky toe or whatever, or big toe, and they're going to stitch it up and it'll be fine. And Brad's
Well, he
embarrassed.
even acknowledges it because it's a classic. He does that is the good part of the scene, right? Because the knife goes through the foot. It probably hurts like the dickens.
Sure, yeah, you ever get a paper
so-
cut?
Yeah, I mean,
No stitches
absolutely.
needed. It still feels like hell.
So yeah, he sees that and is like freaking out. And it makes sense. And then when you pull it off and you're like, that's it. And then he realizes it. So that's the key is he's like, but then the other good piece of news that happens right then is there was another person that got brought in with a stab wound from a gang fight and they died. And so the doctor hears that. Is the doctor anybody? Like he doesn't show up in the first page of the IMDb, but just a very deadpan keeps saying, "Oh no,"
Oh
with
dear. Yeah.
no
He's just a great
affectation.
little character, that's for sure.
But so he comes out and says, "Sorry, your friend is dead." They all freak out, and then while this is happening, Pruitt shows up. Day says Pruitt, and he shows up and basically says, "I did get your car to the garage. I did." Now this garage is Jeff. I got to say, like, I want to get my car serviced at Dawson's garage because apparently you bring a car in at like 7, 8 at night with a broken windshield and flat tire, and they get it repaired within the
Yeah.
hour. Like,
Meanwhile, while one of the main employees is in police custody.
I mean,
And clearly your friend, because Dawson called him originally to be like, "Hey man, you got to get home. Like I saw
yeah,
you."
it was on a CB radio. So that's the
So they're
important one. This is-
clearly friends, like not just employer employee. So the other people that are at this hospital are the two adult men that were having a fight that, they're being brought in for medical attention. The police have them or whatever. And the guy's like, "Those guys were they're the kids that stole my car." And he's right about to get him. And then Pruitt just shows up, bashes into the guy. And he's like, "I got it. Your car's at Dawson's. I covered the windshield because that's my fault, but I can't afford the tire as well."
I would assume the implication was he was going to pay for the tire.
He was.
And then his tire budget got destroyed because he ruined the windshields.
Well, he also has legal fees he might have.
And all that. Well, and then that's also the ending joke because he says it's there. He gets him out of the hospital, so that gets us out of a lot of stuff. That's how Brad gets the free medical treatment on his foot.
He's
They're
also
gonna run
on the
away.
lam now, though.
And that's what he says. He's like, "Gotta go. Cops are after me." And you're like, "Bye, Pruitt."
This guy rocks.
He's the best. I love Pruitt.
He
At
is-
this point, they're walking. Sarah says she has to make, which is hilarious. And they wind up at a house party at the University of Chicago. Exactly what we're saying. In Chicago, it is very easy to go from gangs fighting each other to, I'm trying to remember the band. The band is a funny one because they're a real band that had some good stuff in them. They're playing, so they end up at a frat party. Sarah has to go use it. And while that's happening, some of the frat guys recognize Chris as the Playboy centerfold. And then we get Dan, played by George Newbern, who is Superman later. And he comes up and starts hitting on her. And again, like you're saying, unfortunately, it falls more on creepy than sweet, but trying to go both levels where he's just like, the hottest woman at the University of Chicago is a 17-year-old. And you're like, could have made her 18 just in the script, but is what it is.
Yeah, right.
That's all you had to do. Just one. All you have to do is say she's a senior in high school already. Just call her 18. That's all you need to do, movie, but not what happens.
Yeah, I'm looking up who the band was. Was it Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes?
I think that, and they have at least one hit that I think happens. And then this is also where David Simpkins, who is the writer of the movie, shows up. He's one of the college guys too. So this movie does a lot of cameos, both for like things that Chris Columbus liked, Thor, as well as like people related with the movie.
I would like to add too that this frat party, first off, this frat is filled with, I don't know who's in this frat, but it's clearly a frat house that has Greek letters outside. But there are nerds there. There are, quote, bohunks there. But what's really funny is that this frat hired like a band where the lead singer's in their 40s, which is just fascinating to me. That I'm like, you guys hired, like, do you guys not have like a
maybe? Okay, well, here's an easy bit of retcon that doesn't matter. That didn't hit me, but like I was like, weird frat party with a live like professional band. They're a professional band. I'm like, maybe they're like alums. So maybe like alums out of town or something. But anyway.
Yeah, that's probably not the case.
So anyway, to this, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm gonna do another throwback, and it does relate because we're talking Justice League voice actors. You and Tom and Jeff watch Batman. There was a funny episode where Tom's like, "I don't understand how Catwoman gets this expensive apartment," and you're just like,
that was recent. Yeah.
You're like, "Tom, have you ever seen a hot woman in the real world?" Because at this point, Dan's hitting on Chris, Elizabeth Shue, and he's like, "What's going on?" And she tells him the story. He's like, "Is there anything I can do to help?" And she's like, "Can you just give me $50?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, sure." And it's like, yep, and makes complete sense. It's Elizabeth Shue. Everybody in this movie, whenever Elizabeth Shue has encountered a man in this movie and is like, I am in trouble, can you help? They're all like, absolutely.
Yes.
He manages to get her 45, which I think is perfect because we're not too worried at this point, but it's going to provide a nice little thing there.
Yeah.
And then Dan also offers to drive them on. Daryl, by the way, at the meantime, has found out that like he's like making out with the college woman because he actually had the audacity to listen to her, unlike her boyfriend. He does do something great where they're all chugging beer and he's got a glass full of.
He's got a stein full of popcorn with a little ring, like a cha-ching bell on it, which I think like a bike bell, like the ring bells that you would have with your thumb. Yeah.
And he just pops that out, Daryl's just with the exception of the cut line that we mentioned earlier and one scene at the end, he is just the absolute best in this movie. But Dan, Sarah goes to the restroom. They're all good. Dan's offering to drive them to the garage and is giving them the money. So we're almost out of it. They get to the garage. It's fine. But like, Dan's like, should I? And she's like, it's fine. Go. And he leaves. Even with how the character, because like later Dan shows back up. I'll give a spoiler. I don't buy that he would have left, but we kind of need it for plot stuff. So fine. Dan drives off. And then we get Vincent D'Onofrio himself, who is Mr. Dawson. He comes out holding a sledgehammer. Who knows what he's been doing in the shop?
And nothing to do on a Friday night.
Yeah. And then he's
as a workaholic is what he is.
Or maybe he was doing CrossFit in the back, like hitting the tires or whatever. Never know.
He also carries a small sledgehammer with him.
I'm saying maybe that's what he was doing. Maybe he was working out doing that. But he shows up. Sarah kind of freaks out and is like, oh, it's Thor. And then we get the funny combo, like Sarah being the imp, as you noted, because Brad's like, it's not Thor. And she's like, don't listen to him. He called you a word. And you're like, Sarah, read the route. Like, we need to get the car. Just
heard rumors about me, kid?
Out. Yeah. Yeah, that was whatever. But Mr. Dawson's like, I'm not giving you the car. Give me the full $50. They only have 45. I think he's probably just having a night. His best friend is on the lam. He just lost his tow truck driver. Probably feeling bad. He's like, give me my money. Sarah says, now, this is where it gets interesting, where, as you noted, Sarah as a Thor fan has seemed kind of off. And we know why, because Thor wasn't originally in the script. And one of the synopsises I've read has basically said that. It's like all of Sarah's Thor knowledge seems to be bad in this movie, which I kind of go both ways. She's a little kid, so maybe she just likes drawing him.
But it's smarter to pick a character that has a 25-year history instead of somebody who's only been popular for 5.
Yeah. But she basically says, Thor, you're not yourself. You're missing your hat.
Your magic helmet,
which doesn't really apply. Although the Blake character in the Thor comics, was basically like cast down to earth by Odin and forgot himself. So that lines up a little. But
I would like to add, by the way, that Vincent D'Onofrio was shredded in this, and this was right after he was a dump truck in Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, he is. Dude's got range.
Yeah.
So she's like, take your helmet, Thor. And he's like, you're giving me this helmet? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, take the car. Elizabeth Shue being herself was like, well, where do I send the check? And he's just like, get out. He's like, leave. And then he gives does the very old Coca-Cola commercial. Hey kid. He's like, hey, I already got one. And he throws it back to Sarah.
Yeah.
So we're on our way. We got the car back. We're just going to go pick up Brenda, go home, except Jeff, funny plot device again. They drive by, and it's just good writing. Cause again, we were talking his car. They drive by Mike's car at the restaurant Sarah was supposed to go to. So as they're driving by the restaurant,
yeah, like
not
Shay,
Sarah.
whatever. Yeah,
Chris was going to go to.
Yeah.
Chris drives by it.
She's like, "Great, that's where we were going to go." And Daryl's like, "Well, looks like it's
still
without you."
So he takes a look at it and is like, he's there. And so this was like the one thing to me that stood out as I was like, they just park and go in, and I was like, you don't have money. How are you affording parking? Although maybe they cheated and did like valet or something. Not a major issue, but I was questioning it. Because I've been to Chicago, and that is one of the sticker shocks when you go to a big city and you go there and you're like, oh, let's go have fun. We got budget for food. And then you're like, did you factor in the $50 you need to park for the night? Because if you didn't, you're eating at McDonald's instead of the meal you thought you were having. So as
somebody who got a parking ticket this morning.
Oh, Jeff, sorry.
And that's a $76 hit that I just took this morning by not getting up in time.
Oh, damn it, Jeff. Sorry to hear.
Forgot it was Thursday.
Appleton, Wisconsin, when I got my first parking ticket, said, damn it, was so upset, walked over, $5, Jeff. And I was like,
$76 in Los Angeles.
Dear God. All right, so they go into the restaurant. They confront Mike about cheating. This is where he basically says, "Oh, you're dating this little kid." She's like, "Well, he's nicer." She doesn't say no, but she's like, "He's nicer than you." And he's basically like, "Well, she won't put out."
Yeah,
And
she's
then,
locked at the knees.
oh my God, so good at being smarmy though, just so good.
Yeah.
And then what happens after that is Brad does when we're talking the id super ego thing. He's like, "I would love to punch you, but I'm not going to sink to your level." Daryl says, "I will." Kicks him,
Kicks him in
kicks
the
Mike.
ass like he did to him.
Exactly.
Remember in the
He goes up-
beginning, he said, because she was like, Mike would never beat you up or whatever. He'd never do that. And he's like, he would. He did. He kicked my ass. You want to see the footprint?
Yeah. So yeah.
And then
he's saying-
when we come back to him, he kicks him right in the ass and sends him flying into another table.
which is awesome. Apparently, the restaurant is just like, "Cool, get with it." And then
They just let the maitre d' just lets the kids leave.
and also lets them
Fascinating to
in.
me.
So, I mean, she says we're looking for someone, but I've been to fancy restaurants. That's even one of the backstories that Keith Coogan has, which is he went into a fancy restaurant with Elizabeth Shue, and they're like, "You need a jacket and tie. You're not going in." So this is a restaurant where a bunch of kids undressed up, one dressed as Thor went in, and we're like, "Can you let us in?" He'd be like, "We have a dress code." But anyway, they run out, and at this point, though, Sarah, she saw a really fancy toy store, and she's just ditched them. She has gone off by herself in the middle of Chicago to look at a fancy closed toy store. Real Home Alone 2 energy there, which is going to come up later because Chris Columbus directs Home Alone 2. So they don't know where he is. The gangsters capture her because they used Joe, who knew they needed their car. So they went and waited at Dawson's garage, followed him, captured the kid, and now they're going to be able to get everything back. If they just asked the kid to look at her backpack, this could have all been over. But what it is. Sarah, though, is able to escape and run to her parents' building. So they initially go to the toy store and she's not there, and then follow her to their parents' building. There is a cute little thing here, which is she was eating some chocolate. And so she pushes a button to escape, and there's chocolate fingerprints
she stole
on two.
dessert from the fancy restaurant.
Little imp. So sorry I combined a bunch there because a bunch happens all at once, which is basically the gangsters capture her, but she runs away and runs to her parents' building. That's why she's separated from the main group. They originally run to the toy store. Then they go to the parents' building next. And so everybody now, the gangsters, the kids, the parents, everybody is at the parents' building.
All coming to a head, baby.
And apparently that building has a fun nickname with the diamond. It's also been called the Female Anatomy Building because of the giant diamond on the top, which is hilarious when I was doing research for it. It was built in 84, so it's like really topical for the movie. And
Very
it is
new, very 80s.
And it is most well known for this movie. Sarah is running away from Mr. Canada, and she ends up on an incomplete floor, which is having construction done. And she tries to run from him by basically going out the side using a rope, which is where we get the iconic image in the movie. And he's just like, "God damn it, kid."
I would love to add that this guy he's supposed to be a villain, this guy, but he's doing a tremendous act of heroism to save this little girl.
Like, well, he initially tries to pull her up,
and he's like, "Hold on, like I will save you." Like he's gone from "we have to get the Playboy" to "we have to save this girl." He goes on, and like nothing about this whole process implies that he's trying to do her harm from here on out. He's just trying to save her.
Yeah,
I find that very interesting.
Yeah, it's I mean, what's funny is the main villain is this really like the smarmy one. I just forgot his name. But the main villain is the one that's like, "We're gonna kill the kids," and like his underlings are like, "Are we really doing it?" So it seems like this old guy is leading the charge, and like his employees are like, "Not gonna kill kids, just do what he says."
Yeah, like go get him. But he also never says, he never once says that they're going to kill them either. Like there is the fear of that, obviously, but it is never said. And they just want that Playboy back. It'll shut down their whole operation, blah, blah, blah. It's very funny because he ends up looking for her where the parents are having the party. And he is so disturbed that people are talking to him. And like the mom who's clearly drunk.
Well, this looking down, she thinks he's the caterer because he's standing next to the table.
No, she asks about the caterer. She's like, "These are so good. Do you know who the caterer is?" And he just goes, "The caterer." And then
I misread.
And then the dad goes, No, she's asking. She's like, "These are so good. Do you know who the caterer was?" And he's like, the caterer. And then he's like confused. And then the dad goes, oh, didn't mean to spring it on you like this.
Yeah.
Because
So,
it's like, why are you acting like an asshole right now?
yeah. So the check is Sarah tries to get to her parents' floor, but she goes to the wrong floor, which is in construction one. And she's followed by, they realize she's on one of two floors because of the fingerprints. One of the gangsters chases her to the floor into construction. She goes out the window to try and escape. And he's like, God damn it, tries to save her. The other one ends up at the parents' party. And then our heroes are a step behind. So they all come in. Daryl, Brad, Chris come in, see Sarah's cape from her Thor costume, know she's in trouble, are like, where is she? They see it, and they try the same set of steps, but they just end up at the parents' party because they all stay together. Elizabeth Shue puts on a coat to blend in, to try and look around. And then while this is going on, like the cool thing is Sarah is...
You can see her just fucking dangling off of the 37th floor.
Yeah, all of the characters are looking out the window, seeing her while everybody's oblivious. Second time in the movie this has happened. Chris is able to trip the main villain, very classic slapstick again, by wrapping an extension cord around his foot that he doesn't see. So he walks, the parents are like, funniest thing we've seen all night. And then we also start getting the chase where they were about to head home and they're like, well, we can stay out a little later. So we're like, we're getting you're going to have to get home shortly to stop them. They go up to the floor to save Sarah.
They throw more rope down to get him.
Well, and as you were pointing out, the villain, Ron Canada, because the rope has fallen, he puts the rope down to try and help her. She won't. And so he's trying to go down to get her. And he winds up, basically, they both wind up stuck on the ledge together, but they manage to get Sarah up with the rope and he's stuck out there.
Yeah. And they're like, ignore him. Don't look at him. And he's like, I need to live, please.
And that'll come up later. And then, so what happens is Joe Gipp, he's like, look, just give me the Playboy. I'll give it back and we're all good. And then you can get out of here.
And then the mean guy shows up.
And he gets and
Joe
he punches. Oh, yeah, we got another one punch knockout.
Fuck out. Well, that doesn't seem hard, to be 100% honest.
Yeah.
Joe Gipp looks 27 years old, pretty good shape, against what is essentially Mr. Burns. And he drops this dude so hard where it's like, well, you're going to die, man. They're going to kill you for this. Like, you're going to have to move to Minneapolis.
Yeah,
he's the way you're going to be able to do this. But meanwhile, and they're like, what about him? And Joe Gipp looks out and goes, oh, him. I'll let him sweat it out for a while before I'll get him. There is a horrifying implication in the post-credit scene here.
Because he's just out there.
In which he's still being left out there, which means Joe just left and is letting this man die.
And no one really knows he's there. Although maybe if someone from the party looks up. But the other thing I will throw at this, which, is kind of interesting, is Chicago is the Windy City. They are super high up. The movie plays it as a sound stage, but yeah, like it's a big gust of wind comes by, a plane comes too close because it's pretty high up. He is gone. So it is interesting that two of the people that have helped out our characters basically at the end of the movie are on the run, one from the cops, one from mobsters. But so the kids have gotten Sarah, we're all good, and let's just go get Brenda. So we're almost...
Yeah, Brenda, they arrive and Brenda has to run the gauntlet of the people that she's met. She finally got her glasses back. She's running, she's being chased by the glasses thief. She has to run by Captain Gunn as he's like got his tongue out at her and stuff. And then the get out of my house guy yells something at her, I think. And then she escapes. The glasses lady slams on the phone booth and yells, "You're in my house."
And so that's why the good news is she's outside waiting. They manage to just pull up and pick her up. And then we do get like the very Ferris Bueller's Day Off moment where they literally drive by the parents' car. And she goes, how fast do your parents normally drive? I think they say 40. She's like, we'll drive
45,
80.
Yeah.
So she's driving 80, although 45 on the highway, but whatever. She's driving
that's also a problem, right?
Yeah. So the parents are like, look at that crazy driver. Kids are going to be dealing with that at some point. They get home, quickly kind of clean up, pretend everything is fine. Parents get home, everything go good. Oh yeah, everything's good. The kids are upstairs all just watching a movie. At one point, by the way, Halloween was on, which is just, a nice, there are lots of like little Easter eggs, like My Favorite Monsters in here. There's a gizmo on the thing. There are a lot, the director put lots of little Easter eggs and stuff in. The kids are all watching a movie. Babysitter comes up and is just like, hey, I think I'm done babysitting. I'm like, no, come by next week. And she's like, I think I'm retired. But, just a nice kind of cool down into the night. she goes outside, and Dan, handsome Dan, has shown up. A little creepy at first, but then you realize he's, again, this is another Chekhov's thing, because at one point Sarah says, I lost my
With my
roller
roller-
skates.
Can we
And they're
go
like,
back? And and Chris is like,
they're
"Are you insane?"
leave them.
Yeah.
So Dan has found the roller skates and has decided to deliver them personally. And he knows what he's doing. He's like, yeah, I'll get prop points for this. So he shows up with the roller skates that she apparently left at the frat house. They're outside. The kids are like, kiss her.
You know, he tries to he's like, "I was hoping to hire a babysitter," and she's like, "Why? For like your sister?" He's like, "For me." And it's like, "Oh."
Yeah.
And that's when Sarah yells, "Kiss her!" And then the boom, burn, down.
And then we get a really, I mean, this was, because again, we have a lot of, I mean, Daryl doesn't really have an arc, but he is chaos. And
Being
we just love
awesome.
watching. Yeah.
He's
We
the
just love-
Joker.
Yeah. But you know, Brad and Chris in this movie both very much have like we've gone on an adventure together and have grown up a little at the end of it. So, you know, at the end of the movie, Brad, we see him like looking out kind of despondent and sad. And then he shuts the window, shuts the blinds. We like zoom in on him,
think he
kind of
has
see.
Acceptance. It doesn't
Yeah.
seem as sad.
He's like, yeah. And you know, we also get a Breakfast Club moment where he's like, on Monday, when I see you, it's okay. You know, seniors don't talk to freshmen. And she's like, no, but I talk to friends. So, you know, he's like, he's got a friendship. He's gotten to know her more. He even says that in the movie at one point. He's like, before tonight, I didn't really know you, right? It was just objectification. Got to know you. You're pretty cool. So accepts that. And then handsome Dan does go in for the kiss and kisser. And like I said, and if you are a fan, Tom and Jeff watch Batman, you can probably hear Tom and Jeff making fun of Superman in the dopey voice he uses. You can do all sorts of stuff there. That would be fun to grab.
Over on
Tom and Jeff
Gamefully
watch
Unemployed.
Batman, just like go to Gamefully Unemployed, grab some episodes, and just like do a recut of that last scene with just like, don't tell my secrets kind of stuff. That'd be funny.
So like wrapping this stuff up, looking back at this, critically not poorly received, very relatively well received at the time. I think it's like at a 70 or something like that ratings wise, as far as like reviews go. Nominated for 2 Kids' Choice Awards, Best Actress Elizabeth Shue and Best Movie. So Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, it was nominated for 1980.
Those were as far back as 1988 or 1987.
Yes, sir. Elizabeth Shue tied Molly Ringwald in the Paris Film Festival for Best Actress. So she and Molly Ringwald, who, by the way, Molly Ringwald was supposed to be this character. So it seems like everybody wins in this scenario, because Molly Ringwald won for Keeps, I believe was the movie. Or they tied at the Paris Film Festival, and obviously only one of those movies has held up. Although they both have very similar trajectories in their careers, even to the point of both playing matronly characters in comic book television series, with Molly Ringwald being Jughead's mother, I believe, no, Archie's mother, in Riverdale, and Elizabeth Shue being Elizabeth Shue in The Boys. So they've had very similar careers. Also, the Young Artist Awards. Keith was nominated for Best Young Actor in a Motion Picture. You know who he lost to?
What do we got?
He lost to Sarah, Maya Bruton. She's the one that won the Young Artist Award. So he lost to his own much younger co-star.
I was also going to laugh. I was looking at the Kids' Choice Awards, and Elizabeth Shue lost to Whoopi Goldberg. And you thought Whoopi Goldberg should have been in this movie. So there you go, Jeff.
I mean, I didn't think that. I just said that
they look alike. I heard Jeff saying they looked alike, and if you were going to do a remake, you could do Guinan. They
have very similar traits beyond the obvious one. You know, like their voices are very similar. Their hairstyles are very similar. He's got those like braids that you've seen her in. And then also the movie was nominated for Best Family Motion Picture.
Yeah, I mean this movie, it's one of those interesting, because we talked the flip side. There is Searching for Bobby Fischer was fine, right? Old movie system, it made its money, but it wasn't a hit, and it's forgotten to time. And then of course you also have these like movies from this period of time that did fine, made their budget, everybody got paid, but are forgotten. And this is that like sweet spot of like, wasn't a mega hit, right? Didn't make 100 million, but it made 30 million. So successful movie, but then also managed to stick around in the zeitgeist. I have not done any watching or researching, but you know, they tried to do a reboot, right? Disney, you've got to reboot all the old IP. did eventually do an attempt, I think in 2016 or 2017 with Adventures in Babysitting, a movie, and then they were going to try and do a TV show as well. As we are finding out lately on
They did
streaming
try it in
platforms,
'89, yeah.
but we're finding out on platforms that like they don't know how to show run. And they're like rediscovering TV from whatever, but
Yeah, they did that too with Uncle Buck. Uncle Buck had the thing is when characters are so ingrained in a television show and you try to move those characters into TV with different actors, it doesn't really translate. That happened with the Bill and Ted TV show. Like people just don't seem to buy different people playing these characters. It's very
a weird part about like the other, like first off, the different actors, but of course, like cartoons being a thing. That was what was interesting to me. A lot of these popular movies that stuck in the zeitgeist, like Back to the Future, which, you know, Elizabeth Shue is in as well, like it had a cartoon. And so I remember like the cartoon being nothing like the movie, but keeping it in my interest as a kid, watching it every Saturday. And then later finding a movie as I got a little older. It's interesting how some of those kind of tied together. Don't really have a cohesive thought, but that was the
well, I mean, there are things to say about that, but one of the main things is like it is a successful cult hit that was motivated very big on the home video market. It's a great family film, a family film that parents could watch and enjoy, which is harder and harder to find these days. It is one of those movies that when it was released, I think people were clamoring for it on Disney Plus. When it came out, they were like, "Where is it?" And they're like, "It's coming." I think they had to wait until the contract was up.
and then apparently it came out uncensored initially, and people were like, "What the
It
hell?"
was.
And then it got censored, and people were like, "What the hell? You just can't
So-
please all the people all the time."
What they need to do, what Disney should have done was, and they were doing this for a while, because I remember I watched the old Swiss Family Robinson, and they had the bumper ahead of time, which was like, all right, guys, there's some shit in here that we shouldn't have done. It wasn't okay then, but that's just what it was at the time. And obviously we wouldn't do that now. So please understand that there are going to be some not so great depictions or words being used. These are not endorsed by the company. We're just releasing this art.
Yeah,
Which is kind of what they did with Adventures in Babysitting. And then people were like, no, you can't do that. Like, you can't, I don't want my kid showing up with that. And they're like, we'll do parental locks. And they're like, it's not going to work.
that's too much. I mean, it's funny. This is a babysitting movie with the thesis of the movie being like parents that don't really care. And, you know, just and the hijinks that ensue as a result when you're just like, yeah, let's just pay some teenager a couple bucks to watch our kids. Parents get lazy where you're like, hey, all you have to do is for Disney Plus, set up a password. And they're like, well, my kid's going to get upset that they can't watch the thing. I don't want to do that.
Deal with that. You fix my problem.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I get it. This is one of my all-time favorite movies. This is a movie that I have seen a lot. And as a matter of fact, I watched it twice in the last 12 hours.
I did the same because I watched the censored, and then this is such a nerd comic guy thing, Jeff. Because when I was reading up on it, and they're like, Disney Plus cut out 10 seconds of footage, and I was like, got to see that extra 10 seconds footage. Pay for the special edition.
$3.99. Let's do it. But
Absolutely worth it.
It is great. It is one of those movies that I absolutely say. And obviously, if you are somebody our age, and like I've shown it to people as an adult,
it holds up,
watch
which
this
is
movie.
shocking.
Well, like, this was great. How did I miss this growing up? That's the biggest thing people say when they see that for the first time. It is not divisive. It is not the Goonies, where some people, myself included, are just like, why would anybody like this movie? This movie is widely considered good to great from everybody that sees it. It's very hard to see people that are like, this is a bad movie, because it's not. It's just really good. It has held onto the zeitgeist. There was a television series, like you said, 1989. They tried it.
They were gonna try it again in the 2000s, but or 2010s, 2010s, or whatever, but didn't.
Well, and then there was a reboot in 2016 on Disney Plus that seemed to be pretty well received, but they changed the format a little bit. It was more kind of Babysitter's Club energy to it, and that the name Adventures in Babysitting lends you to a series, and especially an anthology series like a Babysitter's Club.
Well, it even sets it up at the end. You got to come back next week. You got to come back next week. Hey, I think I'm done.
Or like, let's see what Jennifer's up to. She's a part of she's a babysitter. So it could be like a Twilight Zone thing where it doesn't necessarily have to revolve around just one person. You could certainly have that. But if it's adventures in babysitting, babysitting is the main character.
Yeah,
'Cause
I
it's
mean,
fun.
as an example, one of the biggest kids' books, The Babysitter's Club, and you just follow different ones along the way. Works perfectly.
Yeah.
Now, Jeff, speaking, it turns out my wife's station wagon's on the way home, Jeff. We gotta wrap it up. I'm gonna have to go 80. So let's start getting to plugs, and I'm gonna have some fun interstitials there, and then that can be the show. This was an amazing month. We are going to finish this off. Jeff, have we decided, is it Home Alone 1 or Home Alone 2?
I think we should do Home Alone 1.
Solid.
Because for a couple of reasons. And yeah, spoiler alert.
Well,
first
now
off,
you know. Thanks for
we're-
listening to the end.
Yes, we're threading Chris Columbus.
He
You know,
does both, by
it's
the way,
one
as
of-
an FYI. He does 1 and 2.
he does, sure. You know, we do sequels a lot. So, Dre, I would leave it up to you, or we can leave it up to the audience.
I'm going to say this: Ty goes to Home Alone 1 if there is not enough interest. But we'll put up a poll or something. Maybe the
Yeah.
end of this when it comes
If
out. I'll
only
bug
like
you.
8 people or vote, then I'll be like, all right, we're just going to make our decision. But if there's,
We're
I think-
saying let's go for Home Alone 1, but we'll see.
you know
We'll
why
leave
I
it-
think actually, I think I'm going to endorse Home Alone 2. I'm going to go back and I'm going to endorse Home Alone 2. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is the movies that made us did Home Alone 1.
All right, we will plan
So-
on that. And if you've got this is like an essay win. So if you've got a strong answer when this comes out. Speaking of that, Jeff, I'm going to do my one plug for you before we get to the end, which is as follows. And it's some funny news being learned. For those that don't know, Jeff has I Must Break You, which he does on his YouTube channel. He does Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific time pretty regularly. And we might even try and set up a case, Jeff, where if you can't do it regularly, we'll just get stuff out there because you have so much fun doing it. And a lot of your fans, myself included, have sent you stuff. But if you would also like to help that show, you can go to Burbank Sports Cards, which is Jeff's local card shop, and you can buy Jeff gift cards. Now, a lesson we learned, if you buy Jeff a gift card, what you can do, and here's what I recommend because it's extra funny, buy a physical gift card and deliver it to the store and leave it under a silly name. Make Jeff have to go into Burbank Sports Cards, and you'll be like, hi, I've got a $25 gift card for
Just
Ben
leave it
over
under my
here.
name. You can just leave
You
it
can-
under my name.
Jeff says leave it under his name. Dre says the id here is saying leave it under a silly name. But you can go to Burbank Sports Cards, order Jeff gift card. Go with physical is what I'm saying. Do not do digital. You can have those sent straight to the store, and Jeff can pick them up. That is an easy way to help promote because that means Jeff can buy more supplies from us. Break You, and I'll leave the last tie in there and then let you go, Jeff. One of Jeff's Patreon tiers, he sends out actual cards that he has broken. So basically, it's a
do,
nice
yeah.
circle of life.
I
You
can't
can
hold
either-
on to these cards. I will go crazy if I end up starting to amass a collection of trading cards,
So
which I
you can-
already have started to do.
Yeah.
I have to get rid of these things.
You can send Jeff a gift card you can send Burbank Sports Cards a card under Jeff's name, or you can go to patreon.com/Jeff May, sign up for the Two-Face tier or the Mad Producer tier, basically, whatever that one's called, and actually help support Jeff's breaking. That's it. And Jeff, that is the tip of the iceberg on stuff that you do.
I do a lot of stuff. Obviously, Jeff Has Cool Friends. The Dan Larson episode just dropped 2 days ago. So Tuesday was Dan Larson. Yesterday, Jeff's birthday. Today, Nerd. So a big week for the nerds out here. So that's very exciting for all of us to involve ourselves in. So definitely please check that out. You can get it for free, or you can get early access to uncensored episodes with bonus content over at patreon.com/Jeff May, JEFFMAY, one word. For again, you get early access to uncensored episodes. Plus, you get early access to this show. You get this show about 12 hours earlier. And on top of that, you can get Ugh Fine with Kim Crawl. That's a monthly show. That's a Patreon exclusive. And yeah, you can get stuff in the mail. I do a lot of stuff with Adam Todd Brown on You Don't Even Like This Network, such as You Don't Even Like This Show, You Don't Even Like Sports, and our sports card breaking show, You Don't Even Like Sports Cards.
And the Andre Agassi season of You Don't Even Like Sports just dropped. Amazing. You got to listen to it if you're not.
Yes, we did just drop that. Obviously, that's going to be a little while till the next one drops because I'm disappearing. I am currently disappeared. As you are listening to this, I opened my laptop in whatever location I'm in to upload this show, and then bye. But yeah, come check that out. And then of course, Gamefully Unemployed, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman is on the Gamefully Unemployed Patreon. And My YouTube is at Hey There Jeffro, as well as all of my socials, HeyThereJeffro. If you were thinking about my birthday, if you're thinking, hey, what can I do for your birthday? All I want is for you to do some very free shit, which is subscribe on YouTube, notifications, comments, reviews on whatever platform you're doing this. If you want to go to Apple, like, I don't think you guys understand how important a free review is of a show. But all I want for you to do is do those free things. I do like little charity drives on social media and stuff. You don't have to give to that. All I want for my birthday is for you to just do some free shit. Subscribe to the YouTube, watch the videos, comment on them, find the podcasts, subscribe to them there, leave a review. That catapults podcasts.
If you can get Jeff to 500 subscribers on YouTube, that would be a great birthday present. If collectively that's what you all want to do, I would love that.
You can also check me out live at Blast from the Past on Magnolia in beautiful Burbank, California, the second Friday of every month. That's right. October 13th just happened last week. So November 10th is going to be the next Mint on card. And you might know this, but previous guest of the show, or not of this show, but all
the shows
of Ugh Fine and all the other shows, Kim Kral is going to be on the show.
Yeah, Kim Kral has guested on this show, multiple shows on the Unpopular Opinion. Now you don't even like this network. Guested on Jeff Has Cool Friends. If you do not subscribe to Jeff's Patreon, the Ugh Fine show is absolutely worth it. Either Kim Kral's Patreon or Jeff's Patreon has that. Jeff, I think that's everything. I'm going to have to run out the door. So any other comments? And I'll lead us off with that.
Not much. Just, pay homage to your favorite superhero / garage owner.
Love it. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Nerd. If you want to help keep the podcast growing, it's definitely worth your while to head over to patreon.com/JeffMay. And also you'll get bonuses and early access to cool stuff. Cool stuff like videos of Jeff showing off awesome collectibles and doing pack-breaking videos. It'd be worth your while to check out Jeff May's YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@HeyThereJeffro. That's spelled JEFFRO. And shocker, that is also his Twitter and Instagram account as well. So follow Jeff everywhere. You can find me most places on the internet as @NerdNumbers. Also, shout out to Chris Haugen for the outro theme of Pure Magic. Thanks so much, and we'll be back with another nerdy subject soon.